Cheers! Welcome to Hopefully Here. This is my February reading wrap-up. So if you're new, my name is Hope. I like to read, and we're going to talk about the books that got me through the month of February. Now, my reading this month had some highs and some lows. Also, I am very much struggling with my reading right now. I'm finding it really hard to find books that keep me engaged. So there are some on here that are surprising in what I think about them, and I also have a couple DNFs that I'm totally shocked by. It just is where I am right now. But let's start with, I guess these are kind of in order of my enjoyment, but it's very, very loose. We're going to start with the ones that I have physical copies of. First up, we have Brother and Sister Enter the Forest by Richard Mirabella. I don't remember a thing about this book. I didn't mind it while I was reading, but it was not the book that I thought it was going to be. I kind of feel like the little catchline at the front, which is opening like a fairy tale and ending like a nightmare, doesn't really describe what this book is. Like, there's no magical realism or anything. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but it wasn't this. And as I was going through the books that I needed to talk about for this video, I didn't remember it at all. Reading the synopsis, it's coming back to me. You're following siblings, you're following Willa and Justin. And Willa is kind of living like a standard life, and her brother Justin has had some problems. I think he's been in and out of jail, in and out of relationships, some addictions problems, and there are two timelines, and you kind of realize why Justin is maybe acting the way he does. So it's a lot about relationships and trauma. There's a lot going on that I think was done well, but it didn't really stick with me. So there's that. We have The Museum of Failures by Seedy Rigar, and this follows Remy, who goes back to India in the hope of adopting a child, but things kind of don't go exactly as planned. I really enjoyed this book for the first half, and then it dragged so badly. I didn't need it. It does not need to be. You could have cut 100 pages out of this book easily. It did not need to be as long as it was. At 355, it's not even that long, but it was too long. I got bored. But like I said, the first half of it I really enjoyed, so I imagine that there are some people that would absolutely love this book. And the story that it was built around, it was this man going back to India to adopt a child, I found fascinating. He's living in America with his wife, and it was a lot about kind of still being connected to his history and his culture, even though he was so far away, and really discovering or rediscovering that side of him again. So I did enjoy that. I'm not going to talk too much about them, but I did read the entire Canada Reads shortlist. I have a whole video on that. So it was Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune. There was Denison Avenue by Christina Wong, I believe. There was The Future by Catherine LaRue, and oh gosh, what were the other? Oh, Bad Cree by Jessica Johns, and Shut Up You're Pretty by Tia Manjungdi. And I have a whole video on that, so I'm not really going to talk too much about them, but I had a very good time. And I would say that prize starts on Monday. I would say if you are at all interested in some Canadian fiction, that is definitely a good place to head. I read a graphic novel. I read Mouse, The Complete Mouse by Art Spielgwin, and this is a graphic novel, and it talks about Art's father as he is a Jew through World War II, and he ends up in a concentration camp, and what he does to survive. It is fascinating and heartbreaking and terrible and mind-boggling at how humans treat other humans, and I know it hasn't changed much over the years, over the decades, but it was absolutely spectacular, and I know why there was hype behind it. So brilliant. The Vegetarian by Han Kang, and translated from the Korean by Deborah Smith. So this follows a woman who decides to be vegetarian because of a certain reason, and it is fascinating how her family responds to that decision. It's very odd, and it's a little graphic and a little disturbing. It's a lot disturbing, actually, but I enjoyed it. It has definitely got its hype on BookTube. People really seem to love it. I think I'm missing a little bit in the point, but It's a pretty heartbreaking little book, and for me, the most interesting part was how one decision that seems really minuscule, doesn't really impact other people, seems to make a big splash in her family, and it's wild. I read from one of my backlist books, Ablutions by Patrick DeWitt. Patrick DeWitt is an author that I absolutely adore, and so this was his debut novel. It came out in, when were you published? 2009. Yeah, came out in 2009, and this follows a man who works at a bar, a really seedy bar in Hollywood, and his observations of the people around him, but also you learn a lot about his life and what a total disaster it is. And it's just a fascinating little snippet of this guy's world, where it's kind of falling apart around him, but he's very focused on those that he's serving. Really interesting. I read The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. I loved this book. I thought it was done so well. It's a thriller. It seems to follow the classic trope of two people meet on a plane unexpectedly. Somebody needs to be killed, and so there's no connection. It's really interesting. It had me totally gripped. There were some really great reveals, and I really wasn't sure how the story was going to end. I loved that about this book so much, and I think if you're a big thriller reader and you're looking for a thriller that will still keep you engaged, I would definitely recommend this. I really, really enjoyed this one. And then I jumped on the hype train, Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. This book has definitely been making the rounds on BookTube. People love it. I've seen it on one person's prediction list for the Women's Prize in Fiction. And so I decided, okay, I'm gonna try to get my hands on it. I think I've been on the wait list for a couple of months to finally get this one, but I really enjoyed it. It's the story of a serial killer, but you are focused on the aftermath. You're focused on the women whose lives he impacted. And it's a really interesting telling of fictionalization of real events that happened, and how media and the justice system can really let people down. If you enjoyed this, I would say it would pair really well with Know My Name by Chanel Miller, just in terms of the absolute ridiculousness women have to go through when dealing with the justice system sometimes. I think they would pair really well together, but this was really good, definitely worth the hype. And then continuing on BookTube Darling Books, but these are 2 DNFs, and I am so bummed. The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. I was just so bored. I could not get into it. I couldn't find myself caring. I think the premise of the story is wild. You start off with somebody kind of being accused of murder, but then there's a hurricane or massive storm, and all the evidence gets wiped away, and there's nothing they can do about it. And then you jump back in time about this community, and there was just something about the way the story was being told. I couldn't get into it. I tried so hard, but I didn't realize that this author has written Deacon King Kong, and I DNF'd that book as well. There's something about me and this author and his writing that we're just not gelling. So unfortunately, this was a pass for me, but people love this book, and I would say it's still worth people picking up because I am absolutely the anomaly. And then also Daniel Mason's Northwoods. This is one that I am more concerned is just based on where my head is at with my reading right now. I would maybe try to read this again sometime in the future, but this follows a piece of land and all the different people that live on it. And you're not following like the point of view of the land or anything, but it is really interesting, all the different iterations of what happens in this little cabin, this plot of land. And it starts way back when. Oh, I don't know what year, it doesn't say. I don't think it really says what year it starts in, but way, way back, hundreds of years, and it moves into a more present timeline, and I really enjoyed this one. Well, no, I didn't enjoy this one. I thought I was going to enjoy this one, and then I DNF'd it. So, yeah, that's unfortunate. We then have 2 books off of the Women's for Nonfiction prize list, Women's Prize for Nonfiction list. I read Some People Need Killing by Patricia Evangelista, and this was wildly fascinating about a journalist who lived in the Philippines and was covering the policy around drug abuse and drug users, and how it was essentially a kill now, ask questions later type situation. So interesting. And I really, really enjoyed that one. And then I also read Wifedom by Anna Funder. And this is a story of George Orwell's wife. Now, I'll be honest, I have never read anything by George Orwell. He's on a list of authors I would like to get to at some point, but I've never really felt super compelled to pick his stuff up. But the story of kind of how some of his books came to be and his living situation and his relationship with his wife was really interesting. And it's just crazy, again, how often women are written out of history, even when they play a really critical role in something that is historic. And it was quite fascinating. So the 2 nonfictions I did do in audio. I don't mind doing nonfiction in audio, and I had a very, very good time. The list is really interesting. I have a couple more that I would like to try to get to, but it's a pretty long list, and I'm not sure that doing the entire nonfiction list is really a reasonable goal for me. But for those 2, I had a really great time. I read Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. This is a little romance book about a florist and a wedding planner, and they had a previous relationship and then they get stuck planning a wedding together. And I don't know, I think I was expecting or wanting more from this. I read it really quickly, which is I did finish it, but there was something about their chemistry and their relationship that I didn't find believable. For me, I don't know, I'm really picky when it comes to my romances. I'm not somebody you come to for romance recommendations. That's just not what I would say was my forte. So for me, I guess, maybe look at other people's reviews, but it was fine. I needed just a really quick read because I could feel myself struggling, and so I needed something quick and easy, and it fit the bill for that. I started the Kingdom trilogy, starting with These Burning Stars. The first book is the only one out right now, and I actually really, really enjoyed this. So it's kind of I think they call it a space opera. I don't really know what that means. It's like a fantasy book, and what I liked about it, and this worked for me, but I could see it maybe not working for other people, is that there is not a ton of world building. You understand that you're in a different world and things are different, but there isn't a lot of descriptive narrative around what is happening around them and how things work. It's just like a story being told in a different world, and I actually enjoyed that. I found it really easy to read. It was very much more character focused, and you're following quite the plethora of characters. You're following, like the people that are working for the rebellion, and you're following the people that work for the higher overlords, and a lot of different facets. But I would say if you're looking for an easier, kind of lighter book that is still fantasy, this might be one worth checking out. I had a really great time. It's written by Bethany Jacobs, and like I said, I'm definitely going to be looking for the second book in this series. It didn't leave you on a crazy cliffhanger, which I liked, but it definitely left you with a lot of room for where the story could go, and I thought that she did a really great job with this one. Hot Springs Drive by Lindsay Hunter follows a family who the mother finds out that her husband and best friend are having an affair, and then she ends up dead. And this is not the book at all that I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a whodunit story, but you find out immediately as the killing is happening who does the killing, and it's really about the aftermath of it. And so it really kind of let me down. It just wasn't the book I was looking for. Well, I think if I had been told going into it that that's what I was going to get, then I would have maybe been okay with it, but I was really looking more for a thriller, and it missed it for me. But it's another book that I've seen a lot of people talk about. Actually, to be fair, I've seen a lot of people talk about wanting to read it, but I haven't seen many talk about after reading it. And maybe right there, that says something, because it just wasn't exactly the book that I thought it was going to be, but it was interesting enough. I actually have one more physical book. This is one that I own, has been sitting on my shelves for a while, and that is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. I finally read it. This book is absolutely infuriating. It's very well done. I was not, again, sure. I wasn't really sure what to expect going into this one. I knew what the premise was: a woman who gets pulled back in time whenever somebody needs her, like a great ancestor of her needs her, but she's getting pulled back into a time that's very dangerous for her because she's a Black woman and slavery is a thing that's still going on. And so I wasn't sure what to expect, but like this gets dark and it gets dangerous, and I am fascinated by how she was able to write this story and have one of the main characters be living in both times, and her thought process being in both was wild, and what she needed to do to survive and how she tried to prepare herself for when she was get pulled back. Really, really interesting. I absolutely see why it's a classic, and I look forward to reading other works by her. And then the final book I'm going to talk about, which was the first book I read on the month, and that was The Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hadlow. And this follows Mary Bennet. You get the first part of the book, you're kind of living through the Pride and Prejudice time period, and then you move into her own. And I actually really enjoyed this. I think the characterizations of Mary's sisters was done really well. I think her relationship with her parents was heartbreaking, but done really well. It was just a really enjoyable book. It's a longer book, I believe, but I read through it pretty quickly, and I think if you enjoy the Pride and Prejudice world, but you're not looking for a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, which, let's be honest, are rarely done well, I would say you could probably really enjoy this one, as I did. So there you have it. Those were the books that I read in February. It was a short month, and I can feel myself struggling. Like I said, there are some books here that I might need to try again in the future at some point, but you know, life is too short to read a book that you're not enjoying. But I did have a couple of good ones. I would say the best ones on the month were definitely The Kind Worth Killing, Mouse. I really enjoyed Ablutions, The Other Bennet Sister. Yeah, really, when I think about it, I had a pretty decent month. Oh, These Burning Stars. Really enjoyed that one as well. So tell me your favorite book of the month, and tell me the book that you were like, no, not gonna happen. I'm not reading this. I'd love to know. Bye.